A warm welcome to the 11th Right to End Violence Against Women Awards. I am Rachel Adamson. I am co-director of Zero Tolerance, and I'm delighted to have you all with us for this occasion. Quite incredible to think that this event has been an annual tradition since 2013. Zero Tolerance, for those of you who don't know, is a national campaigning organisation in Scotland working to prevent violence against women by tackling its root cause, gender inequality. We work with a range of partners and sectors to do this. One of those sectors is the media. We're delighted to once again be partnering with the End Violence Against Women Coalition to, for the second year running, recognise outstanding writing from across the UK. Throughout our time together today, you'll have the pleasure of hearing from a diverse and inspiring lineup of speakers. Joining me in co-hosting this event is Andrea Simon, the director of the Afua Coalition. Who will provide more details about the awards. And then our great panel of judges will take to the metaphorical stage to announce the winners in each category. Following the award announcements, Tashmia Owen, the presenter for our wooden spoon category, will talk about the impact of media reporting on survivors and how Black and minoritized victims and survivors are made invisible in the media. Then we will hear from representatives from the Fawcett Society and the WILDE Foundation about the first ever complaint against an article upheld on the basis of sexism. Their work exemplifies the impact of collective efforts in challenging media norms and fostering accountability. And to cap off our event, we'll open the floor for your questions to the panel. But before we dive into the celebratory atmosphere, I want to take a moment to address the harsh reality of the violence women continue to face. In 2022, 84 women lost their lives to violence by men in the UK, an increase compared with the previous year and the highest number since the year started ending March 2019. It is a stark reminder that our work is far from over. The forms of violence and abuse we experience are numerous, extending beyond the physical to the psychological, structural, and emotional. Violence against women is a pervasive problem that manifests in various forms, from domestic homicide to internet abuse, female genital mutilation and rape, and the list, unfortunately, goes on. What ties these horrifying acts together is a common root cause: women's inequality. This inequality is further exacerbated for certain groups of women, influenced by factors such as ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, and gender identity. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, which only worsened pre-existing inequalities and created an even more difficult environment for countless women, there is now what some commentators refer to as a polycrisis. And it is against this backdrop that I emphasize the profound importance of your work as journalists. Your role is crucial in bringing about change, increasing society's understanding of gender-based violence and inequality, and challenging these issues head-on. Back in 2013, Zero Tolerance recognized this important contribution by collaborating with media representatives and women's organizations to create media guidelines on accurate and sensitive reporting on violence against women and girls. These guidelines align with and are endorsed by the IPSO Editors Code of Practice and Impress Standards Code. Believe it or not, we do understand the pressures you face as journalists. We understand the evolving nature of media, and we continuously strive to update these guidelines. And so this year, we released media guidelines specifically for broadcast. Your feedback on all our work with the media is invaluable, so please, if there are ways we can improve, let us know. Equally, if you find them beneficial and choose to implement them, we really appreciate your support. But if we're doing something well, let us know. And if we're not, we also really value hearing from you to let us know how we can improve. So now, on with the show. I'm delighted to introduce the director of the End Violence Against Women Coalition, Andrea Simon, to talk about the vital role of the media and the work of the coalition. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for giving us that context of why we do this work and how it relates to ending and preventing violence against women and girls. I'm the director of the End Violence Against Women Coalition, which is a membership organisation of almost 150 frontline services, activists, survivors, researchers and NGOs working to end violence against women and girls in all its forms. We were set up by our members in 2005 to campaign for the changes that will transform the political and social systems that impact violence against women. And we drive that social change through campaigning and influencing state policy and practice, and by challenging the wider cultural attitudes that reinforce and normalise men's abuse and women's inequality. As an organisation, we have long worked with the media to shape narratives, providing context on violence against women and girls, and improving the reporting on men's violence and abuse. This is connected to how we achieve change in our campaigning, both at a political level and by informing and holding the government and state agencies to account, as well as at a societal level by raising public awareness, amplifying survivors' experiences, and striving to ensure that gender-based violence is never tolerated or regarded as just a normal part of life. We know that violence against women and girls is not inevitable and that a different world is possible. That's our ethos. But to get there, we need to challenge and change the way that we think and talk about it. The media is a powerfully important stakeholder and tool for achieving this kind of social change. And we're really grateful to have journalists, editors, writers and regulators in the virtual room with us today who want to work alongside us towards this goal. We have a fantastic panel of expert judges for this year's awards, and we're delighted to have many of them with us today. Our judges are Alice Gould, Head of Complaints at IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, Lexie Kirkconnell-Kawana, CEO of Impress, the Independent Monitor for the Press, Nicole Jacobs, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales, and Afua Hirsch, Professor, Broadcast Journalist, Barrister and Filmmaker. We're also delighted to be joined by incredible speakers today. As Rachel's mentioned, we have journalist and survivor Tashmia Owen. We have Jemima Olchawski, CEO of the Fawcett Society, and Rasheda Malcolm, co-founder and CEO of the WILDE Foundation. Before we hand over to our judges to start the awards event, I'd also like to thank our expert steering group who have generously given their time and expertise over the last few months to shortlist articles from those that have been nominated by the public. You'll see on the screen there the names of our expert steering group. And I must also acknowledge the immense support that we've had from the public who've engaged with these awards over the past year and nominated articles, as well as the brilliant staff teams at Zero Tolerance and the End Violence Against Women Coalition, in particular Joe and our comms manager Sinead, who have skillfully steered all of the work to bring you these awards. So I'll now hand you back to Rachel.
Fab, thank you. I think all I am doing is to take us to the first award of the evening, and it is our news category. So here to present the award and explain the judge's choice is Alice Gould. Alice joined IPSO in 2019 and became head of complaints in 2023.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a real honour to be here and to announce. So I'll dive straight in. So the winner of this award is Connie Dimsdale with the article Child Abuse Victims Demand Action to Tackle Targeting of Girls Online, with a runner-up of Serena Sandhu with Rape Victims' Privacy Seriously Undermined by the Criminal Justice System, CPS Whistleblower Claims. In terms of the winner, This is clearly just an incredibly important piece of work. It was written in a really engaging way, which focused on both the personal accounts of survivors, as well as referring readers to experts and statistics. And it really made clear about the root cause of gender inequality. So I will let the winner, Connie Dinsdale, come forward and say a few words.
Hi, just want to say thank you so much to the End Violence Against Women Coalition and also all the panelists. It's such an honour, particularly given how many amazing work was in this category. I'm so passionate about reporting on these issues, so I'm really, really grateful. But the piece wouldn't have existed at all without the NSPCC, who got all the data together and who work really tirelessly to protect girls and boys as well from being groomed online, among so many other things, as I'm sure everyone here will know already. I worked with Gareth Hill on this, who was always really great. And the other person that I really need to thank is Frida, who incredibly bravely shared her experience of being groomed online for the piece, which can't have been easy for her at all, but yeah, she was amazing, and it wouldn't be the same at all without the testimony of what she went through. So thank you so much. Also all of my amazing editors and colleagues as well for being really supportive with topics like this, which means that I can report on issues that I care about and that everyone here, I'm sure, all cares about a lot.
And there is also a special recognition award for Charlotte Wace, Rosamund Irwin and Paul Morgan Bentley for the Russell Brand accused of rape, sexual assault and abuse. Both the steering group and myself recognise the extensive amount of effort and work that went into crafting this investigative piece. So once again, I'll pass over to them to speak a little bit more.
Hello, thank you hugely for that. It was 4 years of work on my part and a huge number of hours by a massive team of people. Again, I mean, we wouldn't have got anywhere without the women. So a huge thank you, particularly to the women we called Alice and Nadia for being extraordinary and extraordinarily brave to do something like that and speak up when it was so difficult. And then Charlotte was extraordinary on this, and so a huge thank you to her. We had amazing lawyers and amazing editors, so we've been very lucky. But I think, yeah, it was incredibly difficult, as these stories always are, and we're just very grateful to the women for that.
Thank you so much, and brilliant. Congratulations to our very worthy winners in the news category. So next up, we have our award for Best Feature. And to present the winner, I'm delighted to introduce our next judge, Afua Hirsch. Afua is an award-winning writer, journalist, former barrister and filmmaker, known for her storytelling on culture, identity and social justice. She presents the flagship BBC documentary series, Africa Rising and Enslaved, and has authored numerous books on race, identity and the law. She's a professor of journalism at the University of Southern California, a longtime journalist and contributor to various publications, and she's also practiced law as a barrister. Unfortunately, due to conflicting schedules, Afua cannot join us in person today, but we will now hear from her about the awards and her winner via a video she recorded for us.
My name's Afua Hirsch. I am a journalist, a professor of journalism, a filmmaker and author, and it is my absolute privilege to be one of the judges on this year's Right to End Violence Against Women Awards, judging the features category. This could not be closer to my heart. From the beginning of my career as a journalist, starting at the Voice newspaper, I was writing about issues facing Black women and girls in particular in the UK, and my awareness of the particular risks and threats that women of all backgrounds face and the disproportionality of their likelihood of finding justice or even being treated with dignity by the institutions of the state has guided much of my work throughout my career, later becoming a barrister working on criminal defense, immigration and housing cases, often again meeting those same issues facing women and girls, and in my career as a professional journalist, where this has been a theme and an area of much needed activism and advocacy, as well as reporting, that has shaped so much of my work. I was really impressed by the strength of the shortlist in this year's category. It made my life extremely difficult, but it also gave me so much hope that such important and powerful work is being carried out, that women are finding platforms at prestigious news outlets and telling the stories that need to be told, and telling it with an authenticity and integrity that really does make me optimistic about the ways in which we can use our voices, use our intellect, use our talent and our curiosity to dig deeper than the headlines and to ceaselessly interrogate why these systems of power are still failing women in so many ways. I found that there were some themes that cropped up in many of the articles shortlisted in the features category this year, in particular the intersectionality that Black women are facing, particularly blunt-facing unfairness from the criminal justice system, the need for Valerie's law to continually be promoted, a law that requires police and other criminal justice system actors to undergo cultural awareness and sensitivity training, and the sense that many women from ethnic minority backgrounds are being failed in additional ways because they are being ignored, because their concerns are being trivialized. And I was told that one of the criteria I was looking for in these articles was the wow factor. And unfortunately, I found that in each and every one of these stories, because even though I've spent my whole career engaging with these issues and trying to gain attention for them, I still never fail to be shocked by some of the stories that are coming out, that are being reported. And I would like to pay tribute to all of the journalists who entered the awards this year, because it's not just a question of finding the story and trying to do the right thing, but also in being creative and imaginative and hardworking in the telling of that story in a way that does gain the attention that they really deserve. The shortlisted stories this year covered actually a diverse range of topics and experiences. There was My Abusive White Partner Used Race Against Me by Leah Mahon from The Voice, and something that I had never really thought as much about, the ways in which a Black woman in a relationship with a white partner faces additional negative stereotyping and prejudice from the authorities. Andrew Tate and the Rise of Mega Misogynist by Harriet Hall from the Cosmopolitan, really delving into the incredibly important world of online misogyny and its terrifying reach of a younger generation of boys and men who are flocking to these spaces. I Was Sued by My Rapist, The Stark Rise in Abusers Trying to Silence Women for Speaking Out by Katrina Innes and Jennifer Savin from Cosmopolitan. A really remarkable exploration of how men who are accused of sexual violence are weaponizing that accusation against their very accusers, something which unfortunately from my time in the criminal justice system and the legal system in general, I can imagine being possible, even though its impact on survivors of sexual violence is so horrific and important to read about. It's time to pay more attention to the UK's Black Femicide Crisis by Hannah Oguru from Refinery 29, a really important and clear story about how women are dying at the hands of men from violence, and that when you aggregate the picture across the country of the extent and the human stories behind that phenomenon, it is something that is all too often being neglected. This is what it's actually like to report a rape in England in 2023 by Sophie Gallagher for the newspaper, an incisive account told through the lens of one survivor of what it is like to continue persisting to try and achieve justice, and just how steep the barriers in that process are. The killing of Joanna Simpson, she was bludgeoned and buried by her husband. Why is he being set free? By Anna Moore at The Guardian. A shocking story that really shows that even when the system works to identify, try and convict abusers, their sentences still bear a shocking failure to relate to the severity of the crimes they have committed and the impact on victims and families that stems from that. As you can probably hear from that shortlist, it was incredibly difficult for me to choose a winner. And I thank everyone for entering and congratulate you all for getting this far. My winner is Harriet Hall at Cosmopolitan. I was so impressed by this article about Andrew Tate and the rise of mega misogynists. It's incredibly brave and challenging thing to do, to write about a public figure like Andrew Hall in a way that avoids glamorizing him, that refrains from legitimizing him, that navigates the really tricky terrain of the reality that an article like this does essentially give him a platform, but does so with so much nuance and fairness and thorough reporting and analysis that it would be impossible to read this and feel that it's in any way endorsing or promoting his worldview, while at the same time remaining curious about what it is about the message of these mega misogynists that is attracting so many people online. I really think with issues like this, problematic and troubling as they are, we can't ignore them, and simply condemning them without trying to understand the root causes of these phenomena doesn't help us move forward. So I think this is really important work. And I think that it's difficult for us to do, and it's even harder for us to get it right legally, in terms of tone, in terms of the sensitivities many of us feel and the trauma many of us feel from stories that are centering people who have abusive and misogynist mindsets. And yet I felt this article really did shed light on why this movement exists and why it's appealing to people, while also being unflinching in showing the reasons why we should be concerned and we should never be complacent, and really provoking us to think about how we can move forward in a world where market forces are pushing and creating new underground spaces for views like this. I felt this was a really useful article that will have reach in the places that sometimes it's difficult to get to. I think that it will help a younger generation see clearly what they are being attracted to and why that can create far more problems than it solves. And I think as women who face the threat of violence from men who follow these ideologies, it helps us understand where they come from and gives us more clarity about strategies to combat and protect future generations of women and girls from this kind of abuse. So congratulations, Harriet. This was a really impressive piece of journalism, and you made my job very difficult because these were excellent entries. And my overall takeaway from judging this year is how positive I feel about the quality and presence of journalism in this area, which we could not need more. So thank you all, and thank you for listening to this video.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Afua, for your kind words, and thank you so much to the End Violence Against Women Coalition for these awards. Obviously, it means so much to win this award and to have been nominated against such exemplary journalists and colleagues as well. While I am personally over the moon, I also feel really galvanized that our collective journalism is helping to expose online misogyny. As Afua said, Andrew Tate is just one in a sea of men spreading hatred against women online. And it's vital that we hold all of them and the platforms centering their messaging to account, and ultimately show that it won't be tacitly tolerated. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you to my editors at Cosmopolitan as well for their brilliant support and for always spotlighting these important issues. Thank you.
Congratulations, Harriet. So on with our third award, and this one is for opinion and comment. Here to present is Lexie Kirkconnell-Kawana, who is the Chief Executive of Impress, the UK's only independent press regulator. Lexie is a New Zealand qualified barrister and solicitor who has worked in all forms of media regulation in the UK and New Zealand in investigations, research, and semi-judicial capacity. Over to you, Lexie.
Thank you so much, and it was really great to again be invited to participate in the awards. On this particular category, it was a very strong shortlist. I think that's a running theme throughout the awards. The task of judging has been very challenging. The articles themselves, all the comment and opinion pieces, all looked at the current climate of gendered violence and were backed by really strong theses on the causes and effects. And it was disheartening that most of the writers, journalists, were of the view view that our progress on gender equality has stalled, and that the object of gender equality is as divisive and challenging as it's ever been. But there should be some hope in that. It probably means that the message is of gender equality penetrating, and that resistance, I hope, is the last resistance we'll see to achieving real parity. The pieces themselves, there was lots of thoughtful analysis on topics ranging from women on public transport and in public spaces to the rise and entrenchment of incel culture, all very fascinating and relevant, and shedding light and giving space to these important issues. So it was really a matter of splitting hairs on what made the winner exceptional. But this particular article was really written with their community in mind, gave space to the voices of survivors, and acknowledged the author's own personal biases, and as well as some of the industry blind spots that we have in the press sector. So that clarity, that empathy, that personal reflection made it a real standout for me. So my winner was Daniela Vise for their article on victim blaming deeply affecting survivors of sexual assault for the Herald. So over to you, Daniela.
Oh God, yeah. Thank you so much. Honestly, it felt like such a privilege already to have been shortlisted alongside so many other amazing journalists across the country. I've actually read and loved so many of the stories that were mentioned tonight, and I think kind of how it said there earlier as well, is that like it feels as much as it can feel a little bit, I think, like harrowing that we're still writing about so many things that many of us maybe have been writing about for quite a long time. It does feel good to feel part of a wider movement of people across the country that are continuously doing this. Yeah, I feel really honoured to have won. It's an issue that's really close to me. I think my first ever published piece in, that was actually in a media outlet was about ending violence against women. But I think this one in particular was just really special to me. Yeah, I think the emotion that was in there, because it was, I wrote it when I still felt everything very raw. I'd gone to see this local charity in Glasgow, and I think it is a strange feeling when you suddenly have everything turned onto its head and you have presented to you what you're part of, because the whole exhibition they showed me was survivors' raw accounts of the power the media can have. And it was such an eye-opener, like a total punch in the gut at the same time, being a total, really very positive experience, because I took so much away from it. And that's what I was hoping to maybe share through, I guess, opening myself up and just laying out how everything made me feel, to hopefully inspire some other people to try and, I guess, go through the same process. So I definitely couldn't have done it without the work that charities like the Rose Project community in particular have done, because it was them that put the exhibition on, but also all these other amazing charities, like Zero Tolerance, in Violence Against Women Coalition. So yeah, thank you so much for all the work you do, and also yeah, thank you for recognizing mine.
Thank you, and congratulations, Daniela. I'm now going to move on to the award in our Best Blog and Self-Published category. To present the winner, I'm delighted to introduce the Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales, Nicole Jacobs. Nicole took on the role of Domestic Abuse Commissioner in 2019, putting over 20 years of experience in domestic abuse policy and interventions to work in order to drive change in the response to domestic abuse. In the UK, Nicole has done incredible work at Advance, Safe Lives, Refuge, and Standing Together Against Domestic Violence, where she was CEO. And we are incredibly fortunate, in my opinion, to have her as an independent advocate striving for systems change for survivors of domestic abuse. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you very much. That means a lot to hear that from you, Andrea, and a huge thank you to Zero Tolerance and to Eva for hosting this event. And I found it really inspirational. And I did equally find the blog and self-published category inspirational as well. There's 3 people I'd like to recognize and announce our winner, but I wanted to make sure everyone had their name in article or blog read out. The first is Mina Kamari, and she wrote a blog called Being Culturally Competent, Shattering Excuses for Abuse. Hugely important, really speaks to the day-to-day work in our sector and frontline services. And if you all don't know Mina or her work, I would encourage you to write down, jot down a note to yourself to look it up. Her Hope training and consultancy is hugely influential, and I'm a huge fan of her work. The second is Why True Crime is a Misnomer and How It Can Reframe the Conversation by Amber Carey Wilkinson, which was an excellent piece that I found thought-provoking, raising significant issues that we need to consider, and provocative for us all in thinking about what we're seeing in many true crime stories and the fascination with those. And then last and not least was Missing White Women Syndrome, Is the Media to Blame for Racial Bias in Police Searches by Estelle Uba, who is our winner. And I felt, while all of the pieces I was judging were truly thought-provoking, very relevant, if I think to the day-to-day work of our life, I felt Estelle's piece was filled with evidence. It was succinct. It had a really clear call to action, which I felt was really important. And so, although it was tough, I would say it really helped raise for me. And in fact, I circulated all of these articles amongst my team and colleagues because I felt they all had very important things to say for us all. But I would like to congratulate them all, and especially our winner, Estelle. So I will pass over to you, Estelle. Congratulations.
Thank you very, 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 very much, Nicole, for announcing my award. I'm really pleased to accept this award. And thank you to EVAW and Zero Tolerance for hosting the awards. It's really important that we recognise journalists. And funnily enough, when I wrote the article about Missing White Women Syndrome, I wrote it for an assignment at uni whilst I was doing my master's in journalism. But my teacher really seemed to like it, so I decided to then publish it on my online magazine. So to have something that was actually like, you know, a uni assignment being recognized officially is an amazing feeling. And I also think it's important to really raise awareness and highlight inequalities in terms of intersectionality in violence against women, and to recognize that violence against women goes often, you know, ignored or not as reported on when it comes to women of color. So that's why I thought that I would write something on this topic. So thank you very, very, very much for the award. I'm really pleased.
Congratulations, Estelle, and thank you so much, Nicole. On to our 5th category for the evening. And this year we've introduced a new one. It is for broadcast media. So yes, a new category for this year, the Broadcast Experts Pick, to recognise outstanding achievements in broadcast journalism. For the first time this year, Zero Tolerance and E4 Coalition evaluated a number of broadcast pieces and chose finalists and the winner based on factors such as journalistic excellence, storytelling, and the overall impact on shaping social attitudes around violence against women. Throughout the year, using diverse mediums like news reports, documentaries, podcasts, and interviews, journalists have provided in-depth coverage to educate the public about the different aspects of violence against women. They have effectively highlighted the widespread and various forms of violence, including the televised sentencing of Zara Alina's murderer, Jordan Sweeney, allegations of sexual harassment against Russell Brand, and the stories of survivors, too many to name. I could go on. But instead, let's send congratulations to all the finalists in the broadcast category. These are Ellie Flynn for the impactful documentary, Undercover, Sexual Harassment, The Truth on Channel 4. Claudia Williams and Louise Tickle for their compelling podcast, The Death of Kelly Sutton, featured on Tortoise Media. And James Diamond for the powerful Report It campaign for Bauer Media. And so now I'm pleased to announce the winner of our first ever award for broadcasting at the Right to End Violence Against Women Awards goes to James for his Report It campaign. Congratulations. James not only demonstrated a proactive attitude by approaching us to create media guidelines for broadcast, but has also played a huge role in championing positive change in his organisation. He collaborated with a wide range of organisations in the public and women's sectors to create the campaign, amplifying the voices of survivors, raising awareness about the prevalence of violence, and emphasising the significance of responsible reporting. James, over to you if you would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Rachel. I mean, wow, yeah, it's a huge honour to have won this, the first broadcast award from Zero Tolerance and the Coalition as well. And I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say is going to follow the same themes as all the other winners, I'm sure. I mean, the other nominees were so strong as well. So yeah, it's really special to have won. Classic. Few people I just want to sort of give shout outs to and thank. Our content editor at Bauer, Michelle, played a huge part in putting this whole Report It scheme that we did together, and working with myself and Zero Tolerance and the Coalition as well on these guidelines. Mick Coyle, who's one of our senior reporters nationally, played a big part in that. And then also Abby, my editor. I'm in Bristol, so down in the southwest we have a regional editor, Abby, who's been a huge help, and also then Joe from Zero Tolerance and Sinead from the Coalition as well. And of course also all the women who were brave enough to share their stories and be part of our campaign. A lot of them, in fact most of them, spoke, you know, with their own names and on the record and things, which is I'm sure a hugely brave thing and not an easy thing at all to do. Just for those that don't know, so Bauer is the company that owns many commercial radio stations around the UK. Greatest Hits Radio is one, and the one I sort of predominantly work with, but we also have Kiss FM, Magic, Absolute Radio, various others. And I'm pleased to say that after we did our initial week-long broadcast of all the various issues around violence against women and why we in the media need to do more to help put an end to it, we then went on to hold training sessions with all of our journalists across the whole UK, including in Northern Ireland and Scotland and Wales, which is just over 130 people, on the guidelines and what should and should not be done. And you know, clearly it's a work in progress. It's something that we need to be constantly keeping up with. But yeah, that was a special moment to do those training sessions and run them, and hopefully this and through highlighting the work that Zero Tolerance and the Coalition and all these sorts of groups are doing can help take this further and do more. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, I think, really. Thank you so much again, and yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, James, and congratulations for that very impactful piece of work. Now for our sixth and our final award, that's our Wooden Spoon for 2023. I will say a few words. Each year, the Wooden Spoon is awarded to a practice or trend in reporting on violence against women and girls that is particularly prevalent and problematic. This year, after discussions with our expert steering group, we are awarding our Wooden Spoon to the invisibilisation of Black and minoritised survivors in the media. As we've seen in many of the fantastic shortlisted articles and blogs, there remains huge inequalities in the media attention given to Black and minoritised victims and survivors, and women who are also marginalised by their immigration status or other characteristics. This not only reinforces discriminatory and harmful beliefs and attitudes about who qualifies as a perfect, blameless victim, but strengthens the barriers that Black women come up against when they report abuse to the police and other authorities. often finding they're disbelieved, stereotyped, and subject to racism. This results in a poorer likelihood of accessing justice and support services that are tailored to their needs. I'd now like to give a warm welcome to our first speaker, Tashmia Owen, to talk to us about the impact of media reporting on survivors, including how these narratives impact Black and minoritized women. Tashmia is a visual artist, writer, and long-time Vogue campaigner and community builder, with a background working with young people in vulnerable communities and schools, pushing for better sex education and mental health support in her community. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Evo and Zero Tolerance, for inviting me to speak today. I feel really honoured. I would like to tell you all a very small part of my story. I was 12 the very first time I experienced sexual violence. It was a close family member of mine, someone very dear to me, and I was disbelieved, shamed, and silenced, and called a temptress by the adults around me. At the age of 14, I confided in a friend who proceeded to spread it across my secondary school, and I began to be incredibly isolated. At 18, whilst in art school, I worked in a bar in London. One night, a colleague of mine, a man much older than me, with wife and children, pulled me into an alleyway and pinned me up against a wall. This was under the guise of walking me safely to my cab to ensure that I got home okay. I kicked him in the shin, scraping my boot down to his ankle. I proceeded to bring up my other knee and knee him as hard as I could in the groin, and then punch him before I ran away. I told the cab driver about what had happened. I was quite distressed, and he denied that he'd even seen a man with me. I called my manager to tell him that I was not going to come back to work, and I cried all night. The next day, my manager called to inform me the man had been dealt with and would not come near me or my workplace ever again. And he said that when I felt ready, I could come back, but not to cry, not to be emotional about things. Everything had been done and dealt with and resolved. There was no need for me to create more drama around everybody. And in my 30s, I left a controlling and deeply abusive marriage. The end of it felt like an end to a fairy tale romance for many people, including me at some times. There were a few people I could speak to, very few, who understood the betrayal and the manipulation involved in a relationship or an abusive marriage. I began reading, researching, speaking to trauma therapists, and writing a blog about my feelings, my truths, and the impact it had had on who I was. I had some truly, truly confusing and disturbing reactions from people. I was told not to share things that were private or shameful publicly, to think about my children, that it was my duty to ensure they had a strong relationship with their father, to only tell them good things about them, about him. People stopped wanting to hang out with us as a family, as though it was somehow contagious, and as though I was the problem for allowing it to have happened. People were also, including the police, shocked when they realized that he was not a brown man, and that I had not been in a forced marriage or some other culturally expected situation. They were surprised that a charming, affluent white man could be incredibly cruel and violent to the person that they claimed they loved. I'd been asked by the police what I had done to drive such a good man to behave so badly, why I hadn't done more to alleviate his anxieties and issues so he wasn't so angry towards me. His demons, his choices, but it became my responsibility. Not long after, someone who I thought of as a friend, along with a man who I do not know, raped me. I reported it to the police and found myself at the receiving end of other people's unhealthy and intrusive attitudes all over again. Why did I report a friend? Had I given them the impression that I was interested in them? Had I misunderstood what had happened, did I realize that I was quite damaged and probably needed help to get my life sorted so things like this didn't keep happening. Do women really rape other women, and do Muslim women go out to venues that sell alcohol? A huge amount of victim blaming ensued. It's so deeply entrenched in society, in our communities, in our friendship groups, in our families, the notion that somehow women harness a power that causes those around them to behave out of character, to become violent, to feel comfortable in attempting to destroy another human being, to blame a 12-year-old who was fully clothed and sleeping. We're seeing this unfold now with the pushback to Me Too movement and the violence against women and children in Gaza, the Congo, Ethiopia, Sudan. It's a behavior, a weapon that has been used in homes and by oppressive regimes for many, many generations. And I'm not mentioning these experiences to garner any kind of sympathy or to make anyone feel any form of guilt. It's to equip us with the knowledge that we need to move forward. Sexual violence and the culture around it is an impediment to the empowerment of women. Thinking about our language, the way we speak to and of survivors is truly a radical act. Negative portrayals of survivors in the media and press serve to amplify an already present societal impact. Just as the responses by survivors' families, communities, the police can have a re-traumatizing impact on them, the way it is reported in the press turns up the volume of what is already there, validating it and normalizing it. It's a global epidemic and a profoundly devastating one. Knowing this, knowing that every strata of society, every system created reinforces the misogynistic myths around victims and survivors, aids us in unlearning these profoundly dangerous ideas and behaviors that have been used to control and shame women. It allows us to redress the inequalities that render the voices of minoritized women as ones that we do not hear or whose experiences we do not treat as worthy of the same level of concern. It aids us in ensuring those who perpetrate these horrors can no longer hide in plain sight or maintain control of the narrative. Allowing survivors' experiences to be defined by the myths created by a misogynistic, cis, heteropatriarchal world, I have found, feel the spread of isolation, smear campaigns, homelessness, long-term physical ailments, struggles with mental health, familial fallouts, an inability to feel safe in romantic relationships, economic penalties, and the sense of never being heard or believed. The sense that a survivor deserved what happened to them is responsible for somehow another person's choice to deploy violence over them. Our words, our actions can condemn a survivor to a life of reliving trauma, and we can collectively find a way to treat them with dignity and compassion. We can choose to focus on their experiences and the needs to gain justice or to heal. In paying attention to which survivors are believed and given platforms, which ones are heard, we address those who are invisibilized. In considering the level of emotional labor required in their statements and their interviews, we can remove the load which can often take weeks, if not months, to recover from. We need to create spaces for those who are not usually heard. Black women, brown women, indigenous populations women, trans women, disabled women, older women, elderly women. Not only does this lead to creating a space for a wider picture of what is truly happening to women globally, we move towards a way of affecting true change, radical change. When we refuse to perpetuate these myths, to invalidate survivors, we are cutting off the air supply that guarantees abuse and rape culture to thrive. We are actively choosing to rewire society's response to survivors. We are choosing to become a vital part of a survivor's healing process.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Tashmia. Yeah, so much of your story is so heartbreaking, and you tell it so well. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And just emphasizing that let's all pay attention to whose stories we're hearing. Thank you very much. And now I move on to invite our next speakers. So you will all no doubt remember hearing about the article in which Jeremy Clarkson said he hated Meghan Markle and dreamed of her being paraded through British towns and publicly shamed. After its publication, it went on to become IPSO's most complained about article, receiving more than 25,000 complaints, and the first ever complaint upheld on the basis of sexism. So I'm very pleased to introduce two people to talk to us about this. Jemima, the CEO of the Fawcett Society, and Rasheda, author and co-founder and CEO of the WILDE Foundation. Over to the both of you.
Thank you so much. Rasheda and I are both so delighted to be here today. I'm Jemima, I'm the Chief Exec of Fawcett. We are the UK's leading membership organisation campaigning for gender equality and women's rights in the UK.
Thank you. My name is Rasheda and I'm the CEO of the WILDE Foundation, a women and girls charity that uses creative tools, i.e. the power of creative writing, to enable women to express themselves by scribing and sharing their trauma stories, with the belief that one day it could become another woman's survival guide. Our membership is made up of victims and survivors of domestic and child sexual abuse, and also influencers who support our ethos.
So last year, I'm sure many of you will remember, The Sun published a truly horrendous article about Meghan Markle, and we don't want to give it kind of more airtime than necessary here, but it was powerfully and painfully misogynistic and racist. It was written by Jeremy Clarkson, and in it he described his cellular level hatred of Meghan Markle and the sexualized ways that he dreamed of humiliating and punishing her. It was rooted in ideas of women as controlling and manipulative, of Black women as hypersexualized, and of the entitlement of men to mete out punishment and retribution to the women that they disagree with.
The Jeremy Clarkson article caused our members a lot of heartache and despair and a great deal of anger. The women have been attending our creative writing workshops for over 3 years and understand how important words are. Words can heal, as they have found out by writing out their own traumas. But words can also destroy, as they confirm after reading Clarkson's Sun article. We were shocked and saddened, but not surprised, that a professional media organization could let something like this pass. Racism and misogyny have become normalized. We saw this as an attack on women of color and women in general. We saw the press as being morally corrupt, and we really have no level of trust or respect for the printed media. The women felt Clarkson's words were beyond freedom of speech. It was unkind at the least and sickeningly cruel, for lack of a better term, at the worst. It was racist, it was dehumanizing and smelt of misogynoir, a term coined by Moya Bailey to describe the specific racialized violence that women of color experience globally. Our women wanted to take action, to respond, to complain to anyone who would listen. This, they said, not okay. So we wrote to IPSO. The women poured their rage into the page and we emailed that rage, feeling good about doing so, but thinking that we would get no response because after all, we were just a small Black women's charity. When IPSO contacted us to say they were taking our complaint forward, along with the Fawcett Society, out of 25,000 other complaints, we were elated. Never in 100 years did we think our words mattered to anyone. This meant many people had had conversations about this appalling article and were just as disgusted as we were. After the initial joy came the anxiety, the fear. The women started to fear the backlash of the media and their supporters. We were a small charity, and it was daunting to think that we would be subjected to the worst kind of abuse, as we've seen happen to many women. So our trustees did their homework on the Fawcett Society, and we had a succession of meetings to discuss how we would approach them and convince them to join us. The very next day, I received an email from Fawcett Society. And the rest, as we say, is history, or her story. Thank you.
We were so glad to be able to work in partnership with WILDE on this complaint. We shared their horror and anger. Often materials like this seeks to divide women and to pit the good ones against the bad ones. And we wanted our reaction to be one of solidarity. This article normalised male violence against women, and to leave it unchallenged would have sent a very clear message. And the victory, as Rachel said, the first complaint of sexism ever upheld by IPSO, was vital. It made absolutely clear to editors that misogyny is unacceptable. You cannot sell newspapers off the back of perpetuating harms against women. It showed the power of women coming together, raising our voices in partnership and saying enough is enough. And it lets women know that there is a movement out there that will stand with them. I also think it's really important because of the role it played in moving forward the public conversation, in that media coverage which explored why the decision had been made and what was so harmful about the article. It's really important to acknowledge that the complaint of racism was not upheld. And I think Rasheda and I both feel that that speaks to the amount of work that has to be done to build understanding of the ways racism and sexism combine, the tropes used against women of colour and their power. The complaint was a really significant undertaking, but we are so proud that we were able to speak out. Editors need to understand that there are consequences to the words they print. Freedom of speech is vital, but there is no freedom to discriminate. We want to celebrate Ivor and Zero Tolerance's work and the work of the brilliant journalists who report on violence against women and girls with real sensitivity and expertise that we've seen today.
We are over the moon of making history on such an important issue for women. We were, of course, disappointed, as Jemima said, that we didn't get them on racism, but we have our own ideas about the reasons for that. We are both thankful and grateful for the support of the Fawcett Society. Our partnership proved that unity is strength, and strength emboldens and equips us with the confidence to believe in our voices and to take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. While an appalling article, a really positive outcome there, that it's really exciting to hear from both of you about. I think I am handing over to Andrea at this point for the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. And yes, thank you, Rasheda and Jemima, for sharing that with us. And thank you for your actions and also for spotlighting what it takes to stand up against misogyny in the press and the experiences that you had of abuse. I think it's really important that we understand that context for doing this work, and that is also something that we need to see shifts and changes in. I want to now move us on to the question and answer part of the event. So I'm bringing in our panel who you can pose your questions to. I hope you've been thinking about any burning questions that you have had during listening to everybody today, but to give you a bit more time to think and to pop a question in the Q&A box, I'm going to start us off by asking our panel to come in on the question of, besides what we're doing today, awareness raising events like this one, what else do you think needs to happen to improve media reporting from your perspectives, the work that you've been doing. So I would like to welcome anyone to come in and kick us off with their views on what else we need to do. Who would like to contribute first?
I could say something, Andrea, which is, I think Rasheda and the team at WILDE and Fawcett, we found, although IPSO were supportive, that process was quite an intimidating one, and it required a great deal of ongoing work, and it was clear that the Sun had a lot more kind of resource and expertise than we did. And the fact that only one complaint of sexism has been upheld in IPSO's history, I think speaks to the way that currently this process sort of is working in favour of people who already hold a lot of power. So anything that could support women to raise those challenges, I think for an individual, it would certainly be incredibly intimidating, would be a really important step so that we can get that accountability.
Thanks, Jemima. It's really important because it is a massive task, and you often feel like you're one small voice and there's a huge amount of power and authority that you need to push back against, which is why doing things like this and collaborating and working collectively is really important, and no one feels that they're doing this alone. So anyone else who'd like to contribute with views?
I'm happy to come in there. So we're obviously incredibly happy that the Fawcett Society and WILDE Foundation made that complaint. We do take complaints from representative groups, which honestly, as you say, is a great way of people who may feel that it's not the right time for them to come forward, can have that representation. And we do also look out and help to advise people as much as we can during the process. IPSO also takes active steps to raise editorial standards, so we are consistently monitoring editorial standards on issues like this and engaging with other groups, external groups such as Women's Aid. We've had a lot to work with this for, as well as Clearly Here too, and many other groups this year. Where we do identify areas of concern which can be reflected by this monitoring or the discussions of these interested groups. We pull together guidance which is accessible to anyone in the industry, and have found this to be effective improving media guidelines. So this year alone, we've released guidance on the reporting of sexual offences, as well as reporting on sex and gender identity.
Thanks, Alice. I don't know if anyone else, Lexie, I don't know if you have a view on this in particular.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's always more work that we can do to bring publishers into better regulation and to raise standards of journalism across the board. And we've conducted code reviews and reviews of our regulatory scheme to make sure they're as accessible as possible and reflect public attitudes and changing public attitudes on gendered violence, on sexism and misogyny and racism in the media as well. We also need to recognise that, when we define the media, that's changing. What a lot of the award winners of today's event showed is that the media isn't just a narrow group of household name brand news publishers and broadcasters. The media is much wider, and there are many growing brands and voices in online spaces that are capturing the imaginations, particularly of younger generations. And we need to ensure that those groups adhere to standards and are subject to accountability mechanisms such as regulation as well. So more policy and advocacy work needs to be done in that space to ensure that wherever you are online, wherever you're engaging with media, you can expect a baseline standard of ethical conduct and ethical content, because it's in those unregulated spaces that a lot of harm is taking place, where a lot of these harmful attitudes are being normalized, and it's in those boundaries we need to combat these issues as well. So definitely more policy and advocacy, greater efforts to intervene, to conduct investigations and inquiries, and ultimately to hold people to account poor practices.
Thank you. And that's what I think the guidelines that Zero Tolerance have worked on are really essential to bring some of that practice in line with best practice. I'm going to go to another question and invite panelists to consider how we might be able to make sure that we're including Black, minoritized and marginalized women's experiences in mainstream media. This has been a bit of a theme for this event. When we see reporting on Vogue, certain women's experiences are not regularly centred. So what can we do to ensure that journalists and editors are covering the experiences of many more groups of women? And would anyone like to come in with reflections on that one? I know that you spoke a bit about this, didn't you, Tashmia? I don't know if there's anything you want to add to your contribution before, which was really powerful.
In general, I have found that the survivors who are usually given a platform and who are asked to speak about things and to contribute to surveys or studies or anything else that is going on tend to all come from certain demographics, and it would be good to see that broadened and people from minoritized groups to be asked more often so that there is that visibility there. I suppose journalists, also having journalists from a wider contingent of people would help, because they would have access to communities that perhaps other journalists don't readily have.
Yeah, thanks, Tashmia. And I think, I mean, we do a lot of work with journalists, and we know that there's very fast pace to news stories and quick turnarounds often on comments. And that we have heard from our steering group members involved in this year's awards that process, that fast-paced nature of media means that some of the smaller, highly specialist organisations that are run by and for Black and minoritized women don't always feel able to engage. And that does perpetuate the exclusion of marginalised groups from narratives around violence against women and girls and marginalised women's experiences as well. So I think there's a real need for the media to look at how, and journalists to look at how they can create connections with organisations within the women's sector and get involved in creating those relationships and have a mutual support, so that some women's experiences and narratives are not sidelined repeatedly. We have got a question now from Sarah at Refuge, who wants to thank us for putting on this virtual event. Sarah's a press manager at Refuge and loves her role, which she finds rewarding, and events like this are motivating and energising. She wants to acknowledge how exhausting and thankless our roles working in the Vogue sector and media can sometimes be, and how hard it can be to change social attitudes and challenge misogynistic myths. Events like this are brilliant, but she wants to ask the panel if they have any tips to keep energy in the movement up, and on a personal note, to avoid burnout. Very, very much a live concern for us working in the Vogue sector. I don't know, Nicole, if you have any views on this.
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree more with the comment you just made, Andrea, about how to support smaller or more buy-in for services in the domestic abuse sector to engage with you. I think that is a really great thought for many people here are obviously intensely interested, and I'm sure some of you are already doing this, but it is such a great suggestion to take away, is to kind of cultivate those relationships and build the relationships well before you have an idea of a specific story or something that you wanted to cover, and make sure that they understand how to work well with you. I think having had my own kind of introduction to working with the media when I came into this role, that certainly would really, really help. I spoke at a staff team away day just this morning from one of our larger domestic abuse sector providers, in London. And it was great. I mean, one of the things I think, just, you know, that focus on staff well-being, time together, acknowledging, I think we don't acknowledge enough where we've come and what we've achieved over the past 50 years or so, and before, and how that was achieved and what that took, and how courageous it has been. You know, people who had systems around them who were not at all interested, didn't know what domestic abuse or any of these, some of the issues that we talk about now so readily, wouldn't have recognized them maybe at all, or wouldn't have recognized them with any level of importance. And so it is good. I try to do that for myself, not just to remind myself how old I am, but also just to think about where we've come, what we've achieved over the years, collectively. It's really something to be proud of. And one of the things that I was saying to the group of 150 some people today is, you know, when I would have moved here to London in 1998, you know, it might have been from their organization, maybe a small team of 10 practically at that stage. And now I'm talking to a room of 150 people and doing really innovative, you know, things that will create systemic changes. And so it's to remind us all that we're not there yet. You know, we're very far from where we need to be, and that people who maybe have entered this movement, this change more in recent years, who are much younger perhaps, or just newer to the work, are part of that too, because we have made a few milestones, but we're not there. And so if people are seeing things, and at Refuge, certainly, you know, cultivating that, you know, cultivating those really, you know, challenging conversations, the ones that bring us forward to improve what the ways we're working, lead us more towards the earlier ways of helping and preventing, all of those things just in the frontline service environment is really, really important. People understanding the change they're making in the world, day in and day out, is so important. And of course, that's not what gets covered very much in the media. Again, just from today, I did an interview earlier for Channel 4 News. And one of the things I was, you know, just before we started the interview, the journalist said to me how extraordinary the help of the domestic abuse service had been in the couple of cases that of people who were being highlighted tonight. And this is about just absolute, you know, chronic, continual breaches of orders that just are unpoliced and unaccountable. And I thought, I'm glad she was recognizing that that's the role of that service. It is about supporting, but it's also about that institutional advocacy. So I would say at Refuge or anywhere, those would be the kind of key points that I'd make, and also making some space and time for that. And for that matter, everyone listening, you know, the people who've been nominated, who've had awards tonight, you know, recognizing the change you're making in the world, the space you're creating for really, really important matters to be understood better, and giving ourselves some grace along the way, that of course we're going to make mistakes, of course we can all do better, but that this is incredible work, and we're all part of change that that is yet to come. You know, we still have a lot to do, and being part of that is pretty inspirational, even though it's exhausting, I know.
Thanks, Nicole. And very, very true words. And I wondered actually if Rasheda and Jemima might have something to say about I mean, you talked a bit about the backlash that you had for actually just speaking up, and what that feels like, and what you can do to resource yourself to deal with those consequences sometimes for standing up against misogyny in the society that we're in.
Rasheda, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I was going to actually say that, yeah, because being such a small group, you've got to understand that when we put that letter together, it was more about for us than anything else. We didn't expect that, you know, anyone would get back to us. And when it happened and we were left reeling, you know, of course, the first thing we did, like I said, was to do our research on the brilliant Fawcett Society and said, okay, we'll put them up front, let them get it all. But would we have gone ahead with it on our own? That's difficult, because in between we had the media trying to get hold of us. We had someone from a magazine that had already said that they did call, which was true, that was correct. They'd called and they asked for a comment. And I said, well, I couldn't give a comment yet because I didn't know what was happening. We haven't got the results, so I can't give a comment. But they went back and said, I said I would give an interview. So already, you know, mistrust was there from the beginning, and we were like really running scared. And I figured if it wasn't for the Fawcett Society, we didn't believe we had the tools. You know, there's this saying that you don't fight people who own ink, you know, we just didn't feel we had the tools to, you know, face the Sun newspapers. So without the Fawcett Society, I think, not that we wouldn't have gone ahead, because I think we felt bitter enough against Clarkson, and we, you know, we wanted blood. We wanted blood from him, because there were so many women who had been through so much, and this triggered childhood memories of bullying, of all kinds of things came up. You'd not believe the amount of things that came up and spilled over into that room from that article. And for the fact that it was allowed to go ahead as well, it shows that, well, no one's thinking about us. And that's the message in our head, that we've got to provide platforms for ourselves. We've got to provide our, you know, provide our own narratives and be in charge of our own narratives, because I mean, there's big debates right now, taking it off course a little bit, about what's going on with Nella and the language that the media is already using on her within the what is it called? I'm a Celebrity. I've never watched it. I just hear comments about it, you know, but yes, I'm seeing the difference in the language in the media that's used on her. And did I answer your question? I do tend to blabber on a bit if you give me the mic, but yes.
That you've really given us insight, because it is often the case that women feel that they can't come forward and speak. And when you are, like you were up against a massive institution, and we know how institutions often come out and protect powerful men with status, it's a very brave step to take, and we all benefited from that. So yeah, we appreciate those things, and it's telling us that we do need to support each other in these battles.
I mean, Rasheda's very generous in the way that she describes the partnership, but we needed them as well. We needed you at WILDE as well. And I think part of the answer, I haven't really got an answer in, at Fawcett, you know, our work is very different to those at the front line dealing with violence against women and girls. So I completely acknowledge that. But I think there's something about stepping in for each other at those different moments, where across the sector, collaborating, where at times where you feel stronger, and at times being able to say, we aren't in a place, or I'm not in a place to work on this right now. And WILDE worked with us and supported us in the development of the content for it throughout that process. And I think also the relationships that we build with each other are such a source of joy. I've loved working with and getting to know Rasheda and the team at WILDE, and that I think it should lift and energize us, the power that we have when we come together, and that recognition you have when you find an ally. For me, that's one of the most kind of resilience building things.
Thank you. I'm going to go to another question. This is about how we might bring more positive stories into the the conversations that we're having in the media. We know that often reporting is read by victims and survivors, and for many it can be a lifeline to read about an outcome that may encourage someone who's experiencing abuse and violence to reach out for help, to report what's happening to them. How do we get journalists to really have an understanding of the impact that these stories can have, and to report on them responsibly? Does perhaps our panelists from regulators might have a view on responsible journalism and the impact it can have?
Yes, certainly. I think first it's to acknowledge that in the UK there is a lot of independent media out there, lots of freelancers that aren't affiliated with particular brands that are able to hold space and give voice to victims and survivors, and unpack and dismantle common hegemonic narratives around violence. And so it's first to think about and supporting independent media and independent journalists and their work. It's really it's not a great labour market out there for working journalists who are often on less than minimum wage and trying to bring these stories to light, or working for free or in involuntary ways. But being able to amplify their work, particularly those that are working in ethical ways, working with communities, working with empathy and equity, to ensure that they're the stories that we give prominence to, that they're the stories that we platform. In terms of what journalists can do, there are a lot of traditional pathways into journalism, but there are also lots of non-traditional pathways. And what we're trying to do as a regulator is capture those that are coming in from non-traditional pathways and ensuring that they have the most adequate training against best practice guidance, and ensuring they've got the level of governance and oversight they need to ensure that they know how to report on these in the most responsible way. So there's lots of things regulators are doing behind the scenes in terms of capturing as wide of the net as possible of those working in the space, ensuring they've got good ethics training and guidance. But also they need an audience. So we are always trying to showcase the work of good journalism. We're always trying to encourage the public more generally to expand their media diet and go outside, the usual, and look to great media that is out there, that is working to raise awareness in this space.
Thank you, Lexie. Yeah, and I suppose it's really about investing in stories that centre victims and survivors' experiences, by putting them at the centre of the story and then putting it in the wider social context around VAWG, using things like statistics to demonstrate the prevalence. You're both informing the public, and you're doing it in a responsible way that also, if those stories are read by victims and survivors, it's potentially empowering. We all know that sort of clickbait headlines widely used, and we still have massive issues with inappropriate headlines that call child sexual abuse, for example, sex with underage girl, or use the terminology child pornography instead of sex, child sexual abuse imagery. It's an ongoing battle, but I mean, increasingly there is an appetite for editors and things to pick up on that and make changes if they're contacted, and that's certainly something that we need to see. But we want that to be happening without us always having to be picking it up and making those calls. Is there anything that anyone else would like to add about working with journalists and the media? Anything that has encouraged you from what you've heard today? I know you've all commented on the fantastic articles that you've looked at through the shortlists, and that's an incredibly encouraging thing. And it's good to be able to point to and reward good examples rather than constantly be highlighting the bad practice that we see. But is there anything else that before we close, and I hand back to Rachel, the panel would like to add? Yes, Tashmia.
The journalists that I felt most comfortable working with and speaking with were ones who really considered my needs and what I required from them and my environment in order to feel safe to be able to share whatever I needed to share. So there were some journalists who were willing to meet me elsewhere because I didn't want anybody near my home. I want to keep that as a safe space. So they were willing to meet me in other areas where I had no associations with things, where it wouldn't become a connection that I later had problems with and would trigger me. They were willing to speak beforehand about the things that I was okay to speak about, and also to agree that if during the interview I changed my mind, I could change my mind and I could say, I don't want to speak about that. I don't feel comfortable anymore. And they were very good at following up well in terms of also when the interview's finished, checking if I was okay to go home, if I needed help to go home, if I needed support later on in the day, letting me know I could contact them if I wanted to just speak to them, and then following up every couple of days just to check how I was feeling, and asking if there was anything they could do to help. Those were the ones that really stood out for me.
Thank you. That's so incredibly important, that that care and attention, both prior to speaking to journalists in the press, but also following as well. And quite often the following, the aftercare is not really there. And it makes such a difference to the individual who shared their story to have that. And that, I mean, we need to see more ethical and responsible behaviour around victims and survivors sharing the stories. I think we are now coming close to finishing, so I'm going to hand over to Rachel for some closing remarks, but thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you to all the panel for some very insightful answers there. It would be lovely actually almost to just finish on all that Tashmia just said there and have that kind of go ringing in our ears as we leave. But you'll forgive me that an event like this doesn't just happen. And so there are a few thank yous that I would like to say as we draw to a close. To our speakers, Tashmia, Jemima, Rasheda, thank you for sharing your stories and the work that you all do in this space. Thank you to our judges. Thanks for taking the time to read and consider so much. Thank you to the team behind today's event, both at Zero Tolerance and the End Violence Against Women Coalition. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. Here's a quick whiz through: Tanvi, Denise, Joe, Sinead, Lynn, Annie, Isabel, and Andrea. Thank you all. Thank you to all the contributing writers, those nominated, shortlisted, and the winners for continuing to raise awareness of violence against women and shifting attitudes so we can prevent it. And finally, to all those survivors whose stories we've heard and will continue to hear in our print and broadcast media. Thank you is obviously not sufficient, but I'll say it. Thank you. And so secondly, on from the thank yous to the writers, please keep writing. We know the work that you do can and does shift attitudes. We also know it can seem lonely. One of our winners earlier, Daniela, but then others in the panel have spoke about the power of a wider movement. And I hope that tonight has helped you see part of that movement and gives you some energy, dare I say it, joy, and some support to keep going. And so in doing that, go find yourself a treat. I have had this warming up for the past hour and a half. So please, celebrate the good practice that you've heard about this evening. Congratulations to all the winners. Thank you to all for joining us, and take care. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.